Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. And in today's episode of Go Solo Live, we'll be talking to Walker Thornton about her solo travels.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Walker, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, absolutely. I'm thrilled to be here.
So we're going to get started taking us through your tales of solo travel. And I'd like to set the stage a little bit first. And what I mean by that is I'd like to take a moment and just kind of say, where were you at in your life when you decided to make some of these trips? And especially, we're going to spend some time today talking about your most recent trip.
So I would say it really started 2 years ago. And at that point, I had experienced the death of my ex-husband, who I had been caregiving for. And so I was free, really, of those caregiving responsibilities. Still single after almost 10 years of divorce, and kind of wondering and waiting for a partner in order to do things with. And realizing that, not necessarily that I wasn't getting any younger, but that there were a lot of things I wanted to do. And it was time for me to shed that idea that single women have to do whatever, or that single women can't do this. And so I took my sort of big first trip for my 60th birthday. And it was an intentional, I'm going to celebrate this alone because I'm worth it. And so that's kind of where I was at that point.
That's awesome. That makes, those milestone birthdays. So one of my big transformative times was when I hit 40. So I can relate to trying to say, okay, when you think about 60, now you can really relate it to this whole experience.
Right. And I was sitting there in this lovely restaurant in Santa Fe, having a really fancy, expensive dinner. I had told the waiter it was my birthday, so I got a free dessert, which came with a candle. And this woman, a couple of tables down, engages me in a conversation at some point, and I tell her, it's my 60th birthday, and she says, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you're alone." And I had a few curse words in my head, and I said, well, this was an intentional move on my part. I am celebrating this. And it reflected everything that I had been battling, and I think that probably all solo women do when they travel.
Well, and that's partly why I started the podcast Go Solo Live, because so many times, and it doesn't matter whether it's coming from men or women, or whether it's coming from people older or younger, none of it matters. It's this whole thing of, that's so strange. Why would you choose to do that? Don't you have any friends or someone that you love that would travel with you? Or all of those questions get packaged up, and it creates this stigma that isn't the reality. And it doesn't mean that we don't have some self-doubt, but it's not our reality.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that, and I'm having my own, or have been having my own internal struggle about that as well. And my own internal struggle is way bigger and more dramatic than anything I faced from somebody else, aside from that woman in Santa Fe.
Absolutely. So you want to tell us a little bit more about what that trip looked like? And oftentimes, why did you pick Santa Fe, and what was that journey like?
I went to Santa Fe again this summer, and that was a bigger journey. I mean, I've had a couple of milestones, 60 in Santa Fe, which was 2 years ago. It was not my first trip out there, but it was my first long-ish, no agenda, just being there trip. Then the following year, I went to New York City, which was unnerving and yet sort of a, damn it, I'm going to prove that I can do this comfortably. And then this summer, I was in Santa Fe and Taos for almost a month.
Wonderful.
And that was a bigger experience for me in terms of being real intentional about getting in my car and going wherever I wanted, trying things that it ended up in one case being kind of scary. And I hadn't really realized at all what I was heading into. So here I'm in this little tiny rental car, 20 miles away from the little town of Abiquiu, which is an hour north of Santa Fe. I'm on a dead-end road that had a warning on the website that said, if it rains, we advise you to stop the car and wait for 30 minutes until the road dries, because this is a slick road. I was on my way to a place called the Monastery of Christ in the Desert. And so about 3 or 4 miles in, it's what I would call a little gravel road. It really was a road at that point. And I realized that I had no service on my phone. I can see the storm clouds. It doesn't really hit me until much later that no one knew where I was. I wasn't seeing anyone in that town. So no one would have missed me. No one would have looked over and said, oh, the house is dark. She's not here. And it was probably the most harrowing, literal, physical journey I've ever been on. It was just 13 miles. It scared the hell out of me. I mean, it really did. And when I got to the monastery, it rained. And so I had to sit there and watch the storm, because you can see these storm clouds coming out there, and just go, okay, this is where I'm meant to be in this moment. And, it was a simple thing. I just drove down this road and back, but there were no houses. There were no other roads. There were no people around. And I worried about this little car I was in. And it's chugging up these little hills, and I can't decide if I've damaged the car or it's too steep, and I, it led to me thinking about all different kinds of things. That I can do that. I mean, absolutely, I can handle that. It was fine.
Yes.
Coming back around this road, and I'm coming around the edge of a cliff, and on the right is this gorge that rolls down to the Chama River. And I have this moment of like adrenaline, just this, like you want to just yell out and go, oh my God. And then I burst into tears. And it was I can't really define the tears, whether it was it was a little of all of it. It was tension, and it was exaltation, and actually, I'm going to survive this. Right. All of it, And plus, it was 6:00 at night. I had made this decision to go late in the day. So, and I wrote about it. I wrote an article about it. I used it as part of a experience during the retreat I went to for the last part of my trip there, and about that idea of risk. And so I was able to do something with it for the readers on my website and for me. But it was huge. I mean, it was just huge in this way I had never anticipated when I said to myself, let's go someplace different today.
Well, so, I mean, that's what you're describing is a very unique experience to you, but not that unique to many of us who have found ourselves in these, what was I thinking moments while we're traveling. And in some cases, there's perceived risk and there's real risk. Right. And you talk about, this experience talks about both, really.
Yeah.
And then there's the idea of putting it out to the universe and saying, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be at the time I'm supposed to be there.
Right. And for me, maybe the whole thing was a risk. I mean, I don't think of it that way, but in saying, I can go off and do this on my own. I mean, I had no doubt that I could do this. It's my 5th or 6th time in Santa Fe. I know the roads. I had a car. I had a free place to stay. I mean, but that risk of saying, I'm going to set my own terms. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to make that choice every morning. Where do I go? What do I do? Who will I speak to? Can I venture down this road? Will I get bit by a snake out in the middle of the desert? Whatever. And it seems to me that to take one risk in this spot means that the next risk down the road is minimized, or I've gained some sort of resource to deal with it better, or differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So as we talk about the trip though that you're driving, and driving on some of those roads is not my favorite thing to do. And I've had to do it for work as well as pleasure. And I'll tell you, it can be an emotional roller coaster as well, on narrow roads and steep and uncertain and with no experience and being alone. That can be a lot. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, I mean, I think that vulnerability that I always have as a woman out there traveling, and even though there are people who would look at me and who might even say, oh, you're past that age where men are really paying any attention. That's not really true.
Right.
I worked for years in the field of sexual violence, so I'm well aware of the dangers. And I could probably change a tire. I used to change my own oil. I can cope with that. I can, but there is still that sense of vulnerability. I am absolutely all alone in the world and in this moment, in this space. And then being able to step into it and say, I got this. And that it makes you stronger. And I can admit those vulnerabilities. I can admit the vulnerability of being alone in a car by myself. But in the middle of the night when I'm having a challenge, I'm not willing always to admit that vulnerability and ask for help. I mean, there are, different kinds of vulnerabilities. And maybe when we can accept and face and come out of one, it helps us to go, okay, well, I accomplished this one, I can accomplish that one. And, if I can do Santa Fe, maybe I can do Rhodes Island. And then I can take those steps further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I do want to know though, because New York is one of my favorite places. What makes you decide to go conquer New York City?
Well, I have been invited to come and give a talk on dating.
Awesome.
For senior citizens. So the joke is they only offered me $100. And I said, yes. What the hell? It's an excuse to go to New York City.
Yes!
And so I was nervous. I didn't know where to stay. I hadn't been as an adult and I was going alone. So I picked a fabulously cute little boutique hotel that was over $300 a night. So, you can see that right there. I made no money at all. And I stayed for 4 nights and it was just fabulous. And I got into a little encounter in a bar that was a little touchy because I foolishly told the man in the gold chain sitting to my right what I did. So being a single woman in a bar at night and saying, oh, I write and I talk about sexuality is maybe a bad thing. And strangers came to my help, to my defense. And he was just creepy. He wasn't dangerous necessarily.
Sure.
But I don't know. And I fell in love with the city. I absolutely fell in love with that hustle and bustle. And I've been back, it was June, I went in September, November, and February. I ended up meeting a man through chance who lived in the city. And so I saw him for a short period of time. And so experience of going out and sorting those things out by myself, being adventurous and, finding myself stuck in the middle of the subway going, oh my God, I have to change trains and, and now I have my own Metro card. So, I feel very sophisticated about this.
I love it.
But I'm a small town girl. I grew up in a town of 500. Mm-hmm. So I went to a small private high school where my graduating class was 35.
Wow.
So I'm a very different person than I was way back then. And so New York City was sort of this pivotal place in a way for me too, because I finessed it and, walked into a fancy hotel and ended up spending $20 on a mixed drink, which was a bit of a mistake, but,
It's one we all make.
Absolutely. It's worth the story. So
absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so you really, and as we talk about, the main audience that I'm working with here is midlife, and your stories are really epitomizing the I didn't grow up that way. I never had that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what allowed you in your mind to shift that said, you know what, it's time and it'll be okay? What shifted?
I think it was mostly about my relationship status. It was about me fighting that childhood story that was pounded into my head, that my worth and my success would be defined by finding a man and getting married, and told that I was really too much and was going to have a hard time if I didn't change who I was. And lo and behold, I got a divorce, which just proved that I was, everything that I was told I would be. And I've had some long-term relationships, but I thought, how silly is that? I mean, how restrictive is that to contain my life and say, I can't do this because I'm single. And so it was as much me sort of accepting where I am and learning to value who I am just for me. And it seemed to me that traveling was part of that. Plus my grandmother, who died early, she was 65 when she died, but she was born in 1900.
Sure.
She traveled all the time. And I loved that so much about her that, reminded me that I can do and experience whatever I want. And so it was more about me shifting into the reality of where I am right this moment in my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you evaluated your present circumstances and you made a determination that if I want this for my future, then I have to shift my paradigm a little bit about what I believe, people in my current situation can or should do. And therefore, once you make that shift, it seems so obvious and easy. It's not.
Right. Well, and once I get there and once I get going, I realize it's perfectly fine. I feel less judged on a trip by being alone than I do in my own community when I go to a little restaurant and someone says to me, will your husband be joining you? It's like, so I'm more comfortable in New York City or say in Santa Fe, meandering around by myself and making choices. And
yep.
I actually don't mind walking the streets in New York City late at night. And I feel okay in those communities. Here at home, I sometimes feel as if I'm being judged for being alone. And then I have the chorus of voices, my mother in all her replicated forms, behind me going, oh, that poor thing, she's still single. What is wrong with her? And
yes.
Yeah. I don't think that is an experience that is unique to me.
Not one little bit. And one of the things that I love about travel is I don't know if it has anything to do with where we are physically, as much as it has to do with where we are when we travel in our own minds, but we get to create our story when we travel. And so you could go to New York if you so chose and sat in that bar with that gentleman with the gold chain and said, I'm an heiress. And you can create that story to be whatever you want. And it gives us a chance to test drive some stories where at home they know too much.
Well, that's a thought too. Yeah. I'm definitely changing that story in bars in the future because telling a strange man that you work in the field of sexuality is a bad idea. So
absolutely,
so that story's changing. But I think you're right, and much of my work of late, my own stuff mirroring what I'm sharing with the people I write for, is those stories we tell ourselves and how they get in the way and how do we figure them out. And because only by figuring them out can we change that script. You're right. Whether it's creating a new image or just going, oh my gosh, I've been defined by this story that I keep transforming and fine tuning and amplifying, for decades. Yeah.
Well, and then it's those layers of judgment that we feel behind those stories because, at home, there, and I grew up in a small town as well. So you can feel, I just had my 25th class reunion. And I feel like, and I can't 100% say this was accurate, but at the reunion, I believe I was the only person who's never been married. I'm the only person who's never had children. And yet, I've had some recent success with my business. And so there's a little bit of rock star status associated with that, but the conversations are very different. And you wonder what stories people think about you, right? And maybe they don't give you a second thought, but certainly it's our own image of what that might be. When you're traveling, maybe it's your physical impression that you're making that's creating some sort of story for someone, but I don't know that we even have that much impact on those that we're interacting with, at least initially, that they even create that story. So, our importance shifts as well.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, I think I met a range of people while I was in Santa Fe this last time from a lot of different countries and cultures, and I intentionally engaged in conversations. And so I think any impression there was made by the interactions that we had, which is a much more authentic approach than it is in a community where we're stuck. But yeah, I'd have to agree with you. Yeah.
So as we think about what are some of the lessons that you've been learning if you've been doing this for a couple of years and you've been making this a part of your lifestyle, what are some of the lessons you've been learning or building on throughout this process?
Gosh, I thought about this beforehand, and I've certainly learned that I can do anything I put my mind to. I am safer than I think I am. I'm actually probably much safer. I've yet to do a foreign country totally alone. I've been on tours. That's my next step, and I'll be much safer there. What I've learned that there's so much richness by stepping out of this box that I have lived in. This is what a woman is supposed to do. This is what a woman of a certain age is supposed to do. And this is what a poor divorced woman who can't seem to get her shit together, excuse my French, is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
So the lesson I think for me is there is no time like the present for me to do the things that feed me and that are fun. I mean, why not? And I'm learning also to make small differences at home around finances so that I can put more money into traveling. Would much rather travel than do some of these other things. And that's been something I have sort of taken on too. Do I really want this dress or do I want to add it to a trip to England or,
Absolutely. Yes.
Assessing. Yeah.
Yeah. And reprioritizing in some ways. I think many of us with Wanderlust have that trip fund. It's certainly not a vacation fund. It is a trip fund. And, that we are going to truly immerse in that experience.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of women who are in similar situations that you found yourself in when you had been divorced. You had been a caretaker. Now that was for your ex, which is a unique circumstance, but many folks, in the midlife age group have found themselves in that caregiver situation. And how does the travel kind of help you reset your priorities once you've given so much?
One of the reasons I divorced was that I knew I needed to find ways to take care of myself and that I wasn't being valued and appreciated in my marriage and that my self-care was important. And I've certainly come to understand that over the 10 years that I took care of him and the 3 years since his death. So finding that time for me, it reinforces my own value, which you can get lost when you're trying to maintain a job, other things in your life, and there's somebody who's depending upon you to show up.
Yep.
So it just reinforces that I am worth taking that time for, and that I can't give to somebody else if I'm depleted. on the other side of it, there's that piece of us that says, oh, I have to look out for this person. And I may be one of five, but I'm the one who's in town or I'm the whatever. So taking a trip like this also lets the other co-caregivers who may be in a less primary role know that there's a place for them to step in.
Absolutely.
Like it or not. But I think so those are important pieces, but it's just really saying I get to live too. And it's really hard for women because I think we, more than men, don't put ourselves first enough.
Absolutely.
And that our job is to take care of others. And by the time they're all done and we feel that we've been released, it could be too late.
I really appreciate the way that you've languaged this, Walker, because one of the themes that keeps coming up in our podcast series has been the word selfish. And I liken the word selfish to self-care.
Yeah.
And I believe that, what you just shared is truly reinforcing of it's time for you to be selfish.
Yeah, I think we need to redefine that word. It's been thrown out at us with such a negative connotation. And men can do things, and when women do the exact same thing, we're called selfish, whereas they may be called productive, forward thinking. I mean, there's this whole dynamic there. And having that ability to say, well, I've decided I'm going to do this, whatever that is, and then doing it. I'm not shirking responsibilities. I'm not just saying the hell with everybody else, but I'm saying I can do this and I can do this. And in my work, I find that there's a very similar sort of comparison and trajectory women need to go in terms of tapping into their own self and their sexuality and their
Absolutely.
That really parallels this whole thing too. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, part of my journey when I was at 40 was coming out of a time where I had gained a lot of weight. A relationship was on the downslide and I was feeling very undesired and undesirable. And so that was part of the work that I did. And yeah, it sure the heck was selfish. And if I hadn't done it, I probably wouldn't be where I am today in my work as well as my relationship. So it's important to take that time and to not feel guilty about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, while I write about desire and I write about sex and I talk to women about that, I also don't think it's really, I think we need to step away from that notion that as women, we are meant to be desired and this is how it looks. So to go off on a trip someplace, you get to be just who you are. I don't necessarily feel this obligation to show up looking like that desirable woman you want me to be. I get to determine my own visibility or invisibility. And it's a little bit different than it is when you're in your own world for some reason. And that pressure is all gone because we've sort of said, this is my trip under my, I'm floating on my own guidelines here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you were to give any suggestions to women who are considering solo travel for the first time, what would, you did it in some ways that felt safe for you. Right. What would your suggestions be?
Probably some that you've said as well, looking back at the book that you wrote, starting small. If you can't go out to dinner by yourself, then taking a trip might be a little bit hard. So getting comfortable going places on your own. I had a reason to go to New York City, which anchored it for me.
Absolutely.
So if anyone wanted to say to me, and nobody did, why the heck are you going to New York City? Well, I'm going for work. I'm going to make $100. I'm going to spend $1,000 or more on my hotel, but I'm going to make $100. This is a business trip, darn it. But
yes,
so funny, yeah. But think about, where do you want to go? Where do you feel like you would be a little bit comfortable? Because I think comfort's important at first, initially. What would support you? I mean, is it a small town? Is it just getting in the car and driving 3 hours away for the heck of it? Or do do you need to fly cross country? And I thought about it. New York City, I wanted my comfort zone. So I stayed in a nicer place than I now feel the need to.
Sure.
More, not really touristy, but more foot traffic, more safe and comfortable and looking like what I was used to in terms of people and cities. So that gave me some comfort. I felt safe in my space because I think that's the other piece is that you're all by yourself. So do you feel comfortable in your hotel? Do you feel like you could walk out the door and not feel afraid? There is some having to learn to ask for help too when you travel, which can be hard for people like me who don't like to ask for help,
Yeah.
And then go. What's holding us back? What are we waiting for? Because we're the only ones who can give ourselves permission. And, I would say that to any woman. Why are you not doing this? Go. Just go someplace. Go to the next city for the day, but go. Because you go once and it feels a little good. And then, it just never happens if we sit at home going, oh my gosh, I want to travel. And there's a picture of Paris on my refrigerator, but I can't go to dinner by myself.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it. So do you have your next trip in mind yet?
I have some business related trips. I chose to go to a conference in New York City because, again, it would be a good excuse. But where I really want to go is abroad.
Okay.
I would love to go to Russia alone without a tour. I just think, it's not the best of times for Americans in Russia.
Right.
And B, it's going to take me a little bit more money than I want to throw out at this right now because I would need a guide because I don't speak Russian. But I've been twice and I know what I want.
Okay.
And I know where I want to go. I know what I want to do. But so I have a couple of small trips planned, but they're not new adventures. They're not, let's give this a new try. And I think what I need to do that I haven't done is to get in the car and go off for 3 days someplace. Pick some destination or, I'm heading west or I'm talking to a woman in Nova Scotia. And we're becoming friends on Facebook and I've never been to Nova Scotia.
Beautiful.
So why not? Why not create that out of this friendship?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. And I love, that you have your bigger goal and you have your smaller steps. And then we have I call like those road trips, like the DIY version. And I'm literally itching. I made sure that my calendar was completely clear for this upcoming holiday weekend. I'm literally itching because I haven't decided how, when, where, if, whatever I'm going to do, but I know I need to go somewhere.
See, I have yet to just get in the car and say, I'll be back in 2 days and then just go. And I think that would be a lot of fun. I just need to kind of have a quasi destination in mind. And that's the thing I should do in the fall, is November is go someplace. Just
absolutely.
Don't know where, just go. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as we wind down our conversation today, I want to make sure that you get a chance to share a little bit more about some of the work that you've been doing, where people could find you to connect with you, and certainly some of the projects that you've recently launched.
Oh, super. Thank you. So I've been writing and working in the field of sexuality for almost 5 years, close to 6. And my focus is midlife women. And it's more about the women than it is necessarily the partnership. And so while it's mostly about sexuality, it's also about our growth as women. How do we take our risks? How we learn our stories? A lot of the stuff we talked about. And so in that vein of thinking about how women do and don't show up around their own sexuality, in relationship or not, I wrote a book called Inviting Desire, which is sort of a simple, not overtly sexual book written for women who want to feel more desire. And it's kind of similar to this travel piece in terms of exploring your own self. What is it you need literally, sort of traveling the map of your own body? And what is it you don't know? What is it you'd like to learn? How do you find pleasure in who you are and what you have right in that moment? And then it moves into relationships. If how you talk about what you want, how you show up, how you communicate with a partner. So I published the book at the end of June.
Wow, so, time flies.
Yeah, it does. So that's kind of what I've been doing, is marketing that, doing some interviews, things like that. So that's done, but it's not done. So I'm sort of trying to figure out where I'm going from there. And I have lots of conversations with women and with men, actually, almost as many with men as I do women. And I want to begin to start offering coaching services, so to speak, with individuals to talk about that, to help them sort of brainstorm what their experience needs. So that's up next for me. I'll be in LA in 2 weeks talking about sexual desire and doing a book signing, visiting my sister, meeting some people. So that's always fun to
absolutely
meet and see new people. So I have a website under my name. It's Thornton.com. So people can find me there. They can sign up for a newsletter. And then I'm on all the usual places. I think I've given you that, Instagram, Pinterest. And, I do a lot of public speaking too. So I'm always open. And what I'm discovering that I want to start doing now, as well as talking about sexuality, is talking about how we age in a way, how we live through where we are right now. There's so much anti-aging stuff out there that hits us all the time that I want to talk about that. I want to be open and positive and kind of say, here are the reasons we have to embrace where we are. So that's up for me next too, is sort of expanding my work a little bit beyond sexuality.
Well, and honestly, Walker, that work is something that attracted me most to having more conversations with you when we met at the Midlife Boulevard conference.
Right.
Because you really put it out there about authentic and being okay with aging. We don't have to disguise, every part of our aging process.
Yeah. Well, and I shared a picture it's on my Facebook page.
I love it.
I bought these $300 purple cowboy boots while I was in Santa Fe. And then came home with, oh my God, where am I going to wear them? So I put on a dress, a little makeup, about the same amount that I have on now, which is not a whole lot, and hair, about like that now, not fully done up. And in the middle of a burlesque party, because it was at a sexuality conference, sure. I had my photo made, and in the boots. So it's a little more physically revealing. The photography, Louis Shackleton, does not touch up.
Awesome.
So I posted the full picture, the whole thing. I mean, I've got my skirt hiked up so you can see the thigh, and you can see the dimples in my thighs. And I said, this is me at 62. This is me not right out of a makeup place. I mean, I'm fortunate because my hair is coming in nicely gray. But I also wanted to say, this is it. And I can choose to embrace it or I can choose not to. So
absolutely.
I shared it. Because I'm all about kind of saying this is the age I am, because then I figure another person can't really have too many negative connotations about that. They can't make me feel bad because I own it. And if more of us could start to say I am 45 or I am 52 or I am 80 and stand up kind of comfortably with that, it takes the stigma away from it. And
it does.
We just have to do that. And it doesn't work if I stand here and go, oh my gosh, I need to pull the wrinkles back, right? Or I got to hide this. Right. Then I become embarrassed and I've contributed to that other person putting me down.
Yep. I agree. So, there's two parts as we're aging. Well, there's many parts, but let's talk about there's the physical, like how is our body actually working? And then there's the image, right? And for me, I'm like, I need to focus on making sure that my physical part is working, and the image is going to be something that I'm okay with. I've put 43 years into making this image work.
Right.
I'm okay with doing another 43 like that.
Right. Well, and I made that decision not to deal with the gray hair, to let it come in. And, I'm now coping with a lot of sun damage from the skin.
Sure.
And it is what it is. I'm not going to hide it. I mean, sure, I've got a little blush on and a little concealer. But like you, I'm taking care of the physical. I'm seeing a trainer every week. I am bound and determined that this body will serve me longer and that I can go and do what I want to do. The last thing I want is to be hampered by physical. And so far I've been pretty lucky,
I love it.
And that's what we have to do, or that's what I have to do. I mean, we all get to make our own choice, but I think when we accept instead of resist, that things become easier.
Absolutely. And I think the theme that we really heard you resonate today is choose to embrace it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Walker, I really treasure the time that we've had together, and I hope that others will reach out to connect with you to hear more about the work that you're doing, or even just connect with you while you're traveling and follow the journeys, because your writings are exquisite. They are very personal, and they take us along with you through the process. And for some who are struggling with whether solo travel or any sort of travel when they're not going with their partner, if you're struggling with that, some of these stories are a great place to get started to understand why this might be a good thing for you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone, this has been Go Solo Live. I'm Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. Thank you for spending your time with us today, and check us out at www.transformviatravel.com. Thank you.